Hello, everyone, and thank you so much for joining us today. My name is Susie Gelman, and I'm privileged to serve as the board chair of Israel Policy Forum. I want to welcome those of you who are joining Israel Policy Forum for the first time today, and welcome back our returning viewers. Before we begin, I want to thank Israel Policy Forum supporters. Our work, including today's program, is made possible by you. Israel Policy Forum relies on donors like you to produce free expert analysis and informational content on the most pressing issues affecting Israel and the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. If you enjoy Israel Policy Forum's webinars but don't yet support our work, please do so by visiting israelpolicyforum.org/support. The driving force behind Israel Policy Forum's work is pursuit of a vision for the future in which Israel's security, its Jewish character, and its democracy are not threatened. But today we find ourselves in a moment in which all three are facing unprecedented challenges. Israel is now in its 10th consecutive week of widespread and ever-growing pro-democracy, which have mobilized hundreds of thousands of Israelis across the country against the Netanyahu government's judicial overhaul. Today, tens of thousands have taken to the streets after the government rejected President Herzog's recent proposal for compromise on judicial reform. Despite public pressure from leading economists, retired security officials, IDF reservists, the high-tech sector, academics, and President Isaac Herzog, the coalition is quickly pushing forward with its package of legislation to remove all meaningful judicial restraints on the power of the government. We are so fortunate to be joined today by Tzipi Livni, a former foreign minister, justice minister, and leader of the opposition, and a very good friend of IPF and of some of us personally, to discuss the state of the fight for Israel's democracy. So, Tzipi, before I get to President Herzog and what he proposed, maybe you want to start by talking about the demonstration that you spoke at today. Tzipi,
yes, sorry. Hello.
Okay.
Yes, the demonstration that I spoke in today was basically of youth and children from the neighborhood taking over and closing the next junction. And I think that you are asking me how did I get there because I couldn't get there because of traffic jams and everything. So somebody came with a motorcycle and I came to the demonstration and it was fun. But mainly we are demonstrating almost on a daily basis, usually Saturday nights. Today was a special day in which we declared that we will demonstrate all over the country. And looking at these young people that are coming, it gives hope. I'm hopeful these days.
Well, that's certainly an encouraging start. And we want to be hopeful with you, Tzipi. Let's dive in a little bit deeper. So, as you know, President Herzog spoke to the nation, I guess it was yesterday night Israel time, to present an outline of what judicial reform could look like, but clearly what he is aiming for is, first of all, a halt in the proceedings, if you will, in order for there to be a real dialogue between the parties and, of course, achieve something that would reach broad national consensus. He called his latest version the People's Plan. It was immediately rejected by Bibi before Bibi left for Germany. And then I see today that the opposition, all the opposition has united behind President Herzog's proposal. So the question really is, what do you think? What do you make of Bougie's strategy, and do you think it can still have an impact?
Unfortunately, the government, the coalition decided to reject it. It was a few minutes after we proposed this guideline, and therefore I think that we need to see what's going on. And the mask of the coalition we're taking off. It's not just discussion between coalition and opposition. It's a huge strategy that it's not about reaching a consensus, it's about changing the nature of Israel as a democracy. So I think that instead of diving into different articles in the president's plan, we need to understand what's going on. And I don't see any situation of a dialogue that will bridge gaps. The gaps are too wide and too deep. Maybe the coalition will try to soften some of the bills next week, but even if they do so, it's not the situation. It's not a matter of different bills that are on the table. It's a completely different views about the nature of Israel, and this is why we are demonstrating.
A little bit more about the elements of judicial overhaul. As of this week, several elements, including changing the makeup of the Judicial Selection Committee, instituting an override clause that would allow a simple majority in the Knesset to override any decisions by the Supreme Court, and raising the barrier for declaring the Prime Minister incapacitated. All these elements have passed a first reading in the Knesset, with 2 more readings to go until they become law. You just alluded to the fact that the coalition is not interested in, apparently, in slowing anything down in order to have real dialogue with the other parties. So could you talk a little bit more about the mood on the street in Israel as the government is quickly moving forward with this judicial overhaul? Some are calling it a judicial revolution. It's certainly not judicial reform in the classic sense of reform.
No.
And the goal, of course, is to push these bills across the finish line before Pesach, which is coming up very soon in like 3 weeks. So after so many weeks that have seemingly led to this existential moment, how is the protest movement and how are people in general responding?
As I said before, in an understanding what's going on, it's also clear that even if they pass 2 bills until Passover, or even if they stop, it's not over. Because it's not even judicial reforms, and it's not about the relations between the different authorities in Israel or between the parliament and the Supreme Court. It started long ago, but it was underneath the surface. When the nation bill passed, it was clear that when we tried to add to the fact or to the article that Israel is the nation state for the Jewish people, we said, okay, with equal rights to all its citizens as written in the Declaration of Independence. And they said, no way. So we said, okay, let's refer to the Declaration of Understanding and Declaration of Independence, and they refused. So these were the signs that it's not about reforms, it's not about giving more power or override of, to the parliament over the Supreme Court or vice versa. It's something very deep. And what happened after the elections is that this coalition represent 3 different fractions that altogether their common denominator is against the Supreme Court, and all of them want to get more power to the politicians. You have the ultra-Orthodox, for them equality is a dirty word, not for women, LGBT, or they don't want to serve in the army. You have the national religious that for them, equal rights to Arabs, it's not something that they want to implement, and they want an open end to do whatever they want in the West Bank. And you have a prime minister who is now very weak and is on trial, so it's his own interest to weaken the judges and to delegitimize all law enforcement in Israel, and he wants the power without any limitation. So it's not just 2 or 3 bills, it's all over the place. When the Minister of Justice put the plan on the table and he shared it with the public, he said, this is stage 1. And later, what they want to do at first is to delegitimize and reduce the power of the Supreme Court and its ability to override Knesset and bills and legislation that are against human rights and so. And later, to put the legislation or those bills that represent the Jewishness of the state above human rights and Israel's democracy. And therefore, it is clear now, and it is so brutal, So people understand, and they understand that it's not a technical issue, these are no judicial reform. And frankly, from a personal point of view, I saw this coming, and I felt alone before the elections. When I quit politics, I was speaking about democracy, and people say, you're a party poofer. Everything is fine. Israel democracy is strong. They will not do something like this. And now they are doing it. So it's clear that, and more people are coming. They are not tired. In 10 weeks, week after week, people are willing to pay the price. And we took Netanyahu by surprise. The coalition didn't dream that all these people will take the streets, will oppose that, and therefore we are at the beginning of something. It's not the end. It's not a done. It's not over. It's a midst of a clash that need to be there, because otherwise we cannot just let them do whatever they want.
Do you think, Tzipi, from where you sit at this moment, and when you were talking about sort of trying to sound a warning before the elections, there's an expression in Hebrew, "En navi be'iro." There's no prophet in his own town, but apparently you were. Just people weren't paying close enough attention to you, unfortunately. There's another expression, "Bachartem kibaltem." You vote for it, you get what you vote for. But I think, I'm not sure that's true, and maybe you can expand on that, what people thought they were voting for and what they actually have gotten. But just one more question about, well, I have a couple more questions about the protests, but do you think, as you said, people are not slowing down, they're taking to the streets in growing numbers. It was reported last Motzei Shabbat between 250 and 500,000 Israelis, which I like to remind American audiences is the equivalent of millions of Americans, millions and millions. It's a lot of people. Do you think that these demonstrations have the potential to achieve the goal of protecting Israel's democracy when you have a coalition and they have the majority, at least so far? They can pass these bills. They don't show any signs of slowing down. So can you talk a little bit about this contrast between what we're seeing in the streets, what Amcha is saying, what reservists are saying, what economists are warning, what high tech is doing, and then what's going on with this government? At some point, and as someone who's served in government in many significant positions, eventually the government does have to answer to the people in some respect. So how do you see that playing out?
As I said, it took the government by surprise, especially Netanyahu. He watched the opposition, and after the election, the opposition was one against the other. It looked like very weak. And he thought, okay, he was in hubris. He said, I have 64 fingers in the parliament. I can do whatever I want. And then he discovered, he can, but he is paying the price, and his ministers are paying the price. He personally is paying the price because he thought that just after the election, first visit will be to Abu Dhabi, he will speak about Abraham Accords, expanding Abraham Accords, suggesting that he will make peace with the Saudis. Next thing in his dreams was to be invited to Washington to have a discussion on Iranian issues, and to show the Israelis that he is what he used to say about himself, another league of international leaders being respected all over. This is not happening. People are watching the situation in Israel. They are listening to our voice. And they listen and they say, okay, things are getting worse in Israel, and Netanyahu needs to explain it. And so he tries to go to Europe, to different places, and then he hears the same. Today, the German chancellor said that he's worried about the internal situation in Israel. Politically, they paid the price. In recent polls, Likud is not stronger as it used to be in the elections. Ministers, people are demonstrating not only in the squares in Tel Aviv, but near the minister's home. They need to give explanation. And the good news is that more and more Israelis that are not center-left feel uneasy about it, feel embarrassed. This is not what they thought that will happen when they voted. So in a way, the brutality way that it's being done created a new camp in Israel. It was always there, but when they called us traitors or collaborating with the enemy, or not patriots enough, people didn't want to be identified as center left. And now people are proud. Speaking about democratic values, it changed from anybody but Bibi, or from campaigning against somebody. It is for something, it's for values. We re-annexed the Israeli flag. This is what we represent now. And I believe that politics is mostly about identity. It's belonging, it's being part of a group, being proud that you are part of this group. And now before the election, the pride was belonged in a way to right wing. And now it's us. And therefore, I don't know how this will turn into, I don't know, preventing the next vote, I'm not sure. But yet, we are in the midst of this. We are fighting. And I hear some voices from Likud, let's soften the bills and so. So I think that they will reassess the situation, the coalition. They need to.
Time is not on anyone's side here, though, right? I mean, they're moving in one direction quickly, and if that direction is going to change, the pressure has to stay on. I want to remind members of our audience to please feel free to either type a question in the chat or in the Q&A box, and we'll get to as many of them in the second half of the hour as we can. Tzipi, could you talk for a moment about the involvement of Arab citizens of Israel in the protest movement? Because obviously judicial overhaul or revolution has significant implications for them as an ethnic minority in Israel. Do you believe that more could be done to make the protest movement and the discourse around it more inclusive to Arab Israelis or other minority constituencies?
The good news is that in the press conference of the opposition, of the leaders of the opposition today, the leader of the Arab party, Mansour Abbas, was there as well. So it showed that the opposition, those that are for Herzog guideline against the coalition, are sitting together, including the Arab leaders. So this is good news. Secondly, listen, this demonstration, it was not organized by parties. It's the people taking the streets, coming out, demonstrating. And it's a pity that the Israeli citizens are not joining the demonstrations, because they are the first that it will affect their life. And we are speaking about equality, without discrimination. They are the first line, if I may say, that will be impacted by this. So I wish they join. Some of them feel for many years alienated to Israel. They feel that this is not connected to them, which is wrong. So I hope that more and more will join. But it's not something that can be organized. It's so beautiful, these demonstrations, because they are not being organized by political leaders or parties.
As you know, judicial overhaul is not the only existential challenge Israel is facing. On top of rising Palestinian terrorism and settler violence, this government is seeking to undermine the horizon for a two-state outcome to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict by increasing settlement construction and legalizing illegal outposts. Just this week, the Knesset passed the first reading of a bill to repeal parts of the 2005 disengagement law, which could greenlight Israelis returning to West Bank settlements deep in Palestinian areas that have been evacuated previously during the 2005 disengagement. What role do you feel the Palestinian issue should have in the national discourse at this moment?
You know that we had 5 rounds of elections without any discussion on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the need to solve it. It is part of my ongoing frustration, I must say. But maybe things are happening now because my camp that didn't want to be focused on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, thinking that if we will not speak about it, it will disappear. And because the feeling was that if you speak about it, it portrays you as left-wing who just thinking about the Palestinians and not about Israel. And this is changing because we are not hiding anymore. We are speaking up. And when you speak about democracy, it is clear that one state between Jordan River and Mediterranean Sea without equal rights is unacceptable. But speaking frankly, and I spoke about this part of the government, of the national religious part, for them, they are acting against Israel's democracy because next stage is annexation. And they don't want to find or to reach a situation of annexation when Israel democracy is strong, because this will be a moment that Israel will say, okay, if we annex the territories, we need to give the Palestinians voting rights. So they are leading us to a situation that is completely unacceptable of annexation without rights to the Palestinians. So the good news, I'm not sure very good, but we have some signs that people understand more that this group represent this kind of irresponsible messianic ideology that can ignite the region, that can continue the conflict in a very violent manner. And what we saw, unfortunately, in Hawara, in the Palestinian village, it was also very symbolic. And for the first time, you could hear also Israelis, you know, they are asking us, where have you been in this engagement? And now we are answering, what did you do in Hawara? So the conflict now it's not the real issue. You can see some signs that there is no democracy with occupation in the demonstration, but this is not the majority, frankly. But maybe this will create a better understanding that it's not just speaking about democracy. In order to keep Israel as a Jewish democratic state, we need to split the land and hopefully to reach peace based on two states for two peoples. But it's too early. It's too early for that. But I hope that people will understand this better.
Thank you. And we recognize that judicial overhaul is an internal Israeli issue, but it also threatens to undermine many of the values that form the basis of Israel's relationship with Jews worldwide, and for that matter, the special relationship that the United States and Israel have always enjoyed since before the founding of the state and certainly its founding. How do you think diaspora Jews who support Israel, how should diaspora Jews support Israel and Israelis fighting for their democracy? And similarly, how do you see, what would you like to see coming from this administration?
I would say liberals of the world unite. It's clear that the relations between Israel and the world Jewry are based on shared understanding. What does it mean, a Jewish democratic state? This was the dialogue, this was the base, this is the understanding. I know that young people feel alienated to Israel when there is less and less feeling that Israel represent the don't represent the same set of values. And I believe that this is a dialogue that needs to be done now, because we, the demonstrators, though believing in a democracy, not just the system of election, but as a set of values, we are fighting, and it's not over. So don't give up on Israel or on this fight. And the messages we know, and this is what I say to demonstrators, our voice is being heard. It's important for them as well. And the more you support, yes, I know it's internal issue, but it's not a small internal issue that you don't want to be involved in. It's about the nature of Israel as a Jewish state and as a Jewish democratic state. And it's important for you, I'm sure. And by criticizing things that the government is doing, you are not becoming anti-Israeli or anti-Semitic. Okay, I heard these verses before also in the past. I criticize my own government, it's fine. It's about Israel, it's about the nature of Israel, it's about keeping Israel's democracy strong, and you are part of this family. And when you are criticizing or supporting those values, it's within the family. And this is why I'm also doing this kind of conversations. It's important because the other option of saying, okay, Israel doesn't represent me anymore, it's the worst case scenario. And I hope it won't happen, never.
I'm with you on that one, Tzipi. I want to ask, before I get to some other audience questions, we have sort of a related question to what I just asked you from Jonathan Camel, who is a member of IPF's board and national chair of IPF Fatid out of Chicago. Jonathan wants to know, is there anything that American Jews are missing about the current debates on Israeli democracy, and how can we best support these efforts?
As I said before, we hear, as you hear us in the United States, we hear you. And the relations between Israel and the world Jewry and the American Jewish communities is important to any Israeli government. Maybe for them it's more important to override the Supreme Court or to annex the territories, but you are being listened also. It doesn't mean that you can change things that we can, but it's important. It's important also for us to know that we are together in it. And I think that it can also be influential up to a moment on Prime Minister's decision, because it is part of his responsibility also to keep the ties and relations between Israel and the world Jewry.
Which he knows very well, right? I mean, he has, yeah. and he's hearing from some of his American friends in ways that perhaps were unexpected, and messages that clearly must not be sitting too well with him either. But I think, it's remarkable, frankly, Tzipi, to see what we are hearing on this side of the ocean, in addition to some of the voices that are still remaining silent. But, that's every organization and individual has to make that decision for themselves. We have a question from Noah Tan, who says, thank you so much for joining us, Tzipi. My question is centered on the three priorities stated by Israel Policy Forum and by Israel: security, democracy, and Jewishness. The current political climate seems to be pitting these against each other. The Israeli right has been putting Jewishness over democracy now for years, and you referred to that. And security is constantly used to justify undemocratic practices. How are people in political parties and on the ground balancing between these competing priorities?
We succeeded for 70 years, even though we had security threats, to keep the values of Israel as a Jewish democratic state, the Jewishness and the democratic nature, as living in harmony and not in contradiction. Those that want to turn the Jewishness of the state to a more religious, yes, they create now a clash between these two values. And therefore, what we suggest is not to reinvent the wheel. I'm speaking since the first demonstration about going back to the Declaration of Independence, because this was the consensus in Israel for so many years. And people tend even to say now, yes, we believe that the Declaration of Independence is important, also right-wing. So let's speak about it. Let's go back and adapt this set of values, because this is not just a declaration, it has some constitutional aspects. And it's important that to know that when the Declaration of Independence was signed, it was signed by all parts of different political parties in Israel at the time. And trust me, Jewish state, they were rivals and hated each other also since day one. But ultra-Orthodox signed, communists, socialists, revisionists. So this was a moment in which they say, okay, this is historical moment, we are putting aside differences and signing, and it's there. And it's not too late to readapt it as part of constitution or a basic law. And this can create, again, the balance in an understanding Jewishness means, from a national perspective, not religious one, and democracy is a matter of values or not system of election. As for security, we faced this for so many years. Maybe it was excuse for some, and I know that some abused security in order to attack the Supreme Court, because the Supreme Court kept always that Israel and the Israeli army, the IDF, will follow the international law as we should, but it doesn't harm Israel's security. So we can have all the three living together in harmony and not in contradiction.
You were former justice minister, so I imagine you have some views about the need for a constitution. I wanted to just ask you, I believe that President Herzog yesterday in his speech referred to a constitutional moment.
Yeah.
Do you think this with all of the turmoil currently underway over judicial overhaul, do you see the possibility that this could be turned into eventually having a proper constitution, or maybe more basic laws that sort of take the place of a constitution? Do you think that's something that could still happen in 2020?
I truly wish, but frankly, this is not the first time that Israel tries to constitute a constitution. I'm ashamed to say, but I was part of a group that tried to form a constitution when I was just a new member in the parliament, and I represented the young generation in this group. You see, it's more than 20 years past, and we didn't succeed because, by the way, of the ultra-Orthodox, and it was easier at the time. It was easier then. So it's more complicated now. And this is why I'm going back to the Declaration of Independence. If you just take this and legislate this as a constitutional basic law, for now, it represents all we need, because it doesn't say the word democracy. It says what real democracy is: equal rights to all its citizens without discrimination, freedom of culture, of speech, of religion. So it's all there. And it used to be a consensus. So I think that it will be easier to go back to this. And these are historical moments. I hope that this is also a constitutional moment, but it's clearly a historical moment. Either we'll split to different tribes or find maybe the thinner common denominator, but that can keep us all as one nation, believing in same vision, even though on top of this we have different opinions. That's legitimate, but it will be difficult to do so. I'm not trying to underestimate or undermine the
Understood.
situation.
It does present sort of an interesting test case if you were to put the Declaration of Independence before the current Knesset and have them vote up or down. I mean, can you imagine ministers?
Susie, I tried to do it before, also in the former Knesset, and they didn't vote for it. This is why I'm realistic. I tried to. They didn't vote.
Well, let's hope it doesn't remain that way, because if you have a majority of Knesset members who can't even vote for the Declaration of Independence, that's a whole other level that we don't want to go to. Back to audience questions, Tzipi. So Noah Jacobson writes, there seem to be some cracks in the Likud around judicial overhaul. You referred to some, but for example, Edelstein and Bitan, I guess yesterday coming out saying he wanted them to slow things down and put a halt to the current proceedings. Do you think, how would you assess the likelihood that a handful of Likud members will withhold support and kill the legislation? And if that happens, what does it mean for the coalition's long-term stability if they try to push through overhaul and fail?
I don't think that it will happen. I don't think so. I think that they are not speaking completely against it. They are speaking against dividing the society. This is why the demonstrations are so important. As individuals, even Julia Edelstein support the idea of reducing the power of the Supreme Court or empowering more the parliament over that. But when they see that the outcome is so harsh and so dramatic for Israel, they say, okay, let's reduce it, let's soften it, let's make it more slowly, let's discuss it amongst us. You could even hear Smotrich, who came to the US, needed to explain, I'm coming back home, and then we'll have a discussion about it. They need to apologize about it, so it's less convenient for them. But the idea that Likud will split over it, unfortunately, I don't think so.
Amanda Berman asks, in reference to President Herzog's speech yesterday, that he expressed concerns about how he feels Israel is also close to a civil war. And I know you want to transmit as positive a message to us as possible, but how concerned are you about that prospect?
You know, you already also asked me, okay, what is the next step? And we will continue to demonstrate. You could see more and more violence. Today also, some of the demonstration were beaten. It's not a clash or a civil war. And I don't see Israel in a civil war in terms of civil war that was in the US years ago. But the discussion is full of hatred. People are angry. Our demonstrators are keeping it without violence from our side. But it's split. It's a split. I would not underestimate the drama. It's a split. It's full of hatred. There is no real discussion. Also in the public sphere, it's a drama. I hope that it will not turn into something like a civil war, but I would not exclude that we'll see violence, or that it will become more violent. Not because somebody wants to see it like this, but things can happen.
Tzipi, I'm happy to ask a question on behalf of Charles Bronfman, who you know very well. Charles asked the following: religious fundamentalists, by definition, are politically rigid. How can you hold out hope for democracy when they are so critical of the basic tenets of democracy, including compromise? Let's suppose the judicial law is passed, then the Supreme Court rules it to be illegitimate. What happens next? So those are two separate questions in one.
It is true that we have this complete disagreement or this different understanding about what is the nature of Israel, when they want to turn Israel into more religious, and when it comes to religious perspective, there is no place for democracy or equality or human rights and so on. And frankly, they believe that the source of authority is not even the parliament and not any constitution. It's about the halacha, and the interpreter is not the judge, but the rabbi. We know that. We faced it. It's not the first time that we hear about it, but they are around 10% of the population. They have a huge political power, but it's more than what they represent within the population. So we shouldn't give up on this. And I believe that now this is a combination that is very destructive, because this is a coalition that for the first time we have all the three together: the ultra-Orthodox, the national religious, and Likud in the same coalition. In the past, we had representative of the Haredim, of the ultra-Orthodox, and also of the national religious in governments, but today they were unleashed. And this is something that never happened before. Even before, they wanted several things to change, but they couldn't because the coalitions were formed on guidelines that everyone from different parties could live with. And the news is what's happened now in this coalition is that it's only this, they represent only this ideology and without any restrictions, any limitation. So I would not take this as by saying, okay, this will happen from now, also in the future. It's a specific situation that happened to us. And what was the other question?
The other question
about
was
overriding.
if the Supreme Court then says a law is illegal or unconstitutional, to the extent you could say something's not constitutional, and then what happens?
But this is exactly, okay, this is exactly why if they pass it, this is what we may face in the near future, that they will legislate, the Supreme Court maybe decide to override, and then people need to decide whether listen to what, to the law, to the Supreme Court, to the government. This will be a huge constitutional break. First time that Israel will, hopefully not, but will face this kind of constitutional drama. And it can lead to a chaos and anarchy.
With the IDF in particular too, right? I mean, you're already seeing signs from the security services about if they're given sort of conflicting orders between the Supreme Court and the government, and who are they supposed to follow? And you're seeing reservists saying they're not going to show up for reserve duty. By the way, Tzipi, I apparently misspoke. I attributed the question about religious fundamentalism to Charles. That was someone else's question. I got my cues wrong, but he did ask the question about if a law is passed, Supreme Court says it's illegitimate, and then what? Then you're in this constitutional crisis moment. Barbara Landau asks, do you have concerns about President Herzog or others agreeing to quote unquote compromise democracy just to end the demonstrations and reduce international concerns? Will the opposition hold fast to the need to protect real democracy as set out in the Declaration of Independence?
His last offer and last speech was quite fair if we take it as a whole. He adds something to his guideline that didn't exist in the first speech, and this was human rights. So, because I criticized at first, and I said, listen, this is not about speaking about who's going to sit in the committee who judge, or judicial committee who judges, how many will be here and there. We have fundamental and real debate that is broader than it. It's like, you know, it's like giving, I don't know, something to somebody who is severely ill and saying, okay, it will be okay. It will not be okay. But now in his last guidelines, he added all these parameters and didn't give the government the majority to choose and to nominate the judges. So I can criticize some of the articles, don't be mistaken, but you can't win them all. So altogether at first, and I wrote it, I spoke about it, I said, no, if you're going to offer a compromise that will deal with some of the bills without dealing with human rights, with values, forget it. I said it publicly. But after yesterday, it's a different situation. And frankly, the government didn't accept it. So we are back in stage one. We are, unfortunately, it doesn't change anything.
So far, right. So we have a question from Farah Badur, who's a member of Israel Policy Forum's Critical Neighbors Task Force. And hi, Farah. Could you speak a little bit on the current government's relations with its regional neighbors, and how likely these relations will be affected if the current domestic instability continues. And let me just tack on to that question, because of course, the Saudis recently let the US administration know what it would take on their part to normalize relations with Israel. And then shortly after that happened, you have the
They
announcement
normalize their relations with
that
Iran.
China is brokering between Iran and Saudi Arabia, which was sort of a head-spinning moment. But if you could talk a little bit about the current relations with regional neighbors, and of course, Bibi is very proud of the Abraham Accords as one of his signature achievements, etc.
Yes, we are all very happy with the Abraham Accords because it is changing the region, and the Emirates opened the door to other countries. I think that Netanyahu's expectations to have normalization with Saudi Arabia were, I think, I think that he believed that the Saudis will completely abandon the Israeli-Palestinian conflict or the Palestinian cause and make normalization. And this is not happening right now. I think that for other regional players and regional countries, listen, frankly, it's not about, unlike the relations with the US, it's not based on being on the fact that Israel is a democracy. We're speaking about some countries that are not. But it is connected to the situation in the West Bank. When you have this kind of hatred phenomena, insisting on visiting Temple Mount, Haram Sharif for them, or what we see in this hate crime in different Palestinian villages. So this can affect the relations. It makes it uneasy for them to continue as things are as usual when their public opinion will turn against Israel. So it is not about the judicial reforms or the bills or the action plan of the government against Israel's democracy, but it is more about the fear that the situation with the Palestinians will deteriorate.
Let me ask a follow-up to that, Tzipi, in terms of whatever pressure might be coming from some of these countries on Israel. The UAE was the first of a few to sign the accords, and it was a big deal. But of course, at the time, the UAE made it conditional on Israel not annexing the West Bank. One could make the argument that there already are steps in that direction under this new government. I mean, if retroactive legalization of illegal outposts isn't a form of annexation, or extending the civil administration capacity now to the finance minister and sort of taking it away from a military administration, which relates to the fact that it's a military occupation. I mean, and you alluded to the fact that Bibi's visit to the UAE has been, I guess, postponed. That's the diplomatic term. But do you see the UAE and other Arab Abraham Accord countries trying to pressure Israel for the sake of keeping up these wonderful relations to not go down this path? Or do you think it's more transactional?
Okay, it depends. It's not all the countries have the same policy. The UAE, when they made the normalization with Israel, they made it clear that they are speaking about war and peace, and they didn't make the linkage with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. I mean, they asked Israel, and Israel said that we will not annex the territory, but this is not the focus of their relations with Israel, unless things will really deteriorate. Now, also Smotrich and this group within the government, they are not going to annex the territories as they wanted to do before the normalization with the Arab world. But we need, and this is important, I think, mostly to the US, because I believe that also the Biden administration and Biden himself, believing in two states, two people, doesn't want that during his term, this vision will be taken off the table, or that Israel will pass the moment of no return. Now, what they are doing, especially Smotrich party, it's not annexation, so you can see it. But these are steps of legal annexation, It did it also before. There was the Bill of Regulation of implying the Israeli law not on settlers, which is legitimate according to the international law, but on settlements. That was the beginning of illegal annexation. Now it takes responsibility on some parts of the army or the civil part that until now was part or under the jurisdiction of the army. And why is that? Because what Israel is explaining all these years to the world, that we are controlling the West Bank for security reasons, which is legitimate. And we are not annexing the territory, something which is not legitimate. So what he's doing step by step. And as you said before, they voted for canceling the disengagement on part of Samaria up north. It doesn't change the situation on the ground, but it's symbolic. And therefore, I think that I'm not sure that if it will continue step by step, some Arab countries that we normalize the relations with will make a drama out of it. But I think that the American administration is worried on watching these steps or building or legalizing illegal outposts and all this stuff. And I'm sure that the Israeli government is being warned about it. And I think that when it comes to our other states that we already normalized the relations with, I think that only if the situation deteriorates into violence or between Israelis and Palestinians, that will be not in the scale that they used to. So this can be, this can turn it against Israel.
We have a question from Nimrod Novik. I think you know Nimrod well. He's our IPF Israel Fellow.
He can ask me directly.
He could ask you directly, but I will ask on his behalf. Do you anticipate this crisis to bring about a realignment of the party system? What are the prospects of a broad-based democratic liberal party replacing the current fragmented structure?
I wish, not for the first time, even in 2013, I offered other parties, Lapid and Yachimovich at the time and Labour, to form not even one party, but to work together, to have an agreed platform that represent the base, and that we can work together. It didn't happen. Later, I called to do it before Blue and White was formed. Some accepted it, others did not. I think that there's an opportunity here, and I'm not sure, okay. I believe that this is an opportunity that needs to be seized by these leaders of the other parties. I'm not sure whether they will do it, but the good news is that for the first time after many years, this camp of liberal Democrats are fighting for this. They are proud. I believe that politics is about identity. And for many years, being proud of the identity was right-wing. In a way, they succeeded in portraying that being right-winger, the other meaning is being a proud Israeli. And for the first time, we are now representing something that we are all feeling that we are part of a group, belonging, identity, and it can be a great opportunity to form something that it will be clear that when you say I am a member or voting for this party, it's clear who you are, what your values are, what you are thinking about democracy, about the need to also reach an agreement with the Palestinians. What does it mean? For now, it's too early to say. I hope it can create a real change in Israel's politics.
So I'm going to let you have the last question, Tzipi, in terms of what have I not asked you, or what have we not covered, or what have we not paid close enough attention to that is top of your mind right now? And do you see a potential tipping point in this crisis, whether it be the economy, whether it be reservists not showing up for reserve duty, whether it be, many other possible events that could somehow really shift the ground?
I did mention it before you asked me why do I think that what can be influential. I didn't mention it, but of course the economy, something which is very important for Netanyahu. The fact that pilots and others are saying that they will not come to reserves. This is something that never happened in Israel. It's a huge change. Frankly, I had thought that this is already a drama that with other coalition would have forced them to stop, but this is not what they are doing. So I don't know what will be the tipping point, but we are in the midst of fight. And when you are fighting, you are not thinking what exactly we do. You're doing what you need to do. And this is what we are doing. And I'm saying that I'm optimistic, not because I know that they will stop next week or what will happen, but I'm optimistic that finally this camp of Democrat liberal is rising, is fighting, feels together, proud of who we are, and we annex the Israeli flags and the symbols, and this represent now what we are and what Israel need to be. And this is the beginning of a change. So if, I don't know whether you didn't cover something, but this is the message that I want to send to you. It doesn't mean that I know something that you don't know, but I think that this is, the things are happening, and it's better than just sitting, watching what the government is doing and thinking that everything is fine. Everything is not fine. We will make it fine.
I think that is a great note to end on. So first of all, Tzipi, hamon toda. Thank you so much for taking time to speak with us today. I imagine we will be certainly inviting you back in the coming weeks or months to help us unpack whatever is happening then. Once again, a big thank you to Israel Policy Forum supporters who are with us on today's call. And again, I invite the rest of you to join the Israel Policy Forum family of donors by visiting israelpolicyforum.org/support. The recording of this webinar will be posted on the briefings page of the Israel Policy Forum website. I also encourage you to subscribe to our podcast, Israel Policy Pod, sign up to receive the weekly Koplo column in your email inbox, and visit the Israel Policy Forum website to access recordings of previous briefings. I also want to mention there are all sorts of new tools on our website, including Judicial Tracker, where you can actually see graphs of where all these elements of the various judicial overhaul legislation package fall and where they are in real time, and a whole bunch of other new and exciting resources on our website. So do take a look at that. Please stay tuned for an announcement regarding our next video briefing. Until then, thanks again for tuning in and for joining us. And again, Tzipi, I look forward to seeing you next time in person, either in Israel or on this side of the ocean. And Tachziki Ma'amad bintayim.
You too.